right, welcome back to another edition of Nest Egg. You got Daniel and myself here today. So, Daniel, we've had kind of an interesting week in the markets, a lot of movement, some data, some Fed talks and different things coming out. So tell us a little bit more about what's going on this week.
Well, certainly we had Jerome Powell doing what wasn't a press conference. It was,
It was like
just
a
general
speech
talk, etc. Earlier in the week, giving the market some optimism that rate hikes are going to slow in their intensity, I guess would be a good way to describe it. So we've seen 3/4 of a point in the last couple of raises. And by all indications, given sort of what was alluded to in that speech, the pace of those would slow such that maybe in December, in a couple weeks here, we see a 0.5 point rather than 3/4 of a point. Still aggressive from a monetary tightening type of standpoint, but altogether a shifting somewhat in kind of the focus of the Fed, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Fed has come out and basically said that we're going to continue to raise rates. We're going to continue to fight inflation. We're not going to stop that. But the market liked the fact, and this was Wednesday, we got a nice ramp into the end of the day after this speech. The market liked that he said, yes, we're going to keep doing this, but we might do it at a slower pace. So we're going to do 50 basis points next time instead of the 75 that we've done the last
is what he
times.
alluded to. It wasn't straightforward in exactly what they're planning to do. They're still very data dependent. But I think what was key and really set up a precursor to what we saw later in the week is that he said more than just looking at the sort of nominal inflation numbers that are coming in, what's front of mind for him / the Fed right now is the jobs picture and the fact that there's so many more job openings than unemployed, roughly speaking, is what they're looking at, because what that does is it creates a cycle of wage growth. So if there's more open positions and there are people looking for positions, then inevitably employers have to be competitive with their wages, which sounds like a good thing, really, for people. But means employers have to be competitive with their wages, offer more to either hire people or keep people. And by then continually increasing wages, inevitably then that should or theoretically trickle down into sort of inflation continuing more than the Fed would like it to. So that's sort of the metric that they alluded to, what was it, Tuesday or Wednesday, that they're going to basically be watching and be mindful of.
Yeah, and then we had jobs data come out today, that we're recording this on Friday, and it basically came in hotter than expected, showing what you're saying, that there was more job opportunities and that increasing wage growth, which is really weird for us to say that's a bad thing or a bad thing for the markets.
Yeah. If you're coming out of a recession, this would be a banner report that you get really excited about because people are returning to work. There's job growth. Just generally speaking, you're seeing hiring, which is a great thing in any environment, but apparently an inflationary environment is not something we want to see. And I think it's why the Fed has, over the past months, really said there will have to be pain in the tightening cycle. So what they're trying to allude to is they need to see tightening in the job market to some extent. Whether or not that's the right solution is not necessarily the topic for this podcast, but it's what the Fed is saying they effectively want to inflict, I guess, to some extent, don't you think?
I think it's interesting how the market reacted to this news. The hotter than expected job data, market was down significantly right when that data came out. At least the futures
was pretty terrible.
Yeah, but over the day, it's kind of been bought up and it hasn't been as bad as maybe that initial reaction to what the data that came out. So it'll be interesting to see how the market plays out these last few weeks. The Fed meets in 2 weeks.
I think it's 2. Yeah, the second full week of December.
Yeah, so they meet in 2 weeks, and we'll see more information there. There'll be a CPI data that comes out right before they speak. So there's a lot of data coming down the pipeline and a lot of things that we'll be watching for, but we're kind of expecting to see at least maybe a moderate drift into the end of the year, a positive sign, hopefully. But obviously, the Fed is driving the bus on what that looks like. So speaking of end of year, this isn't a specific question that we got, but it is a question we've heard from many, many people. What are things that folks can be doing towards the end of the year, these last 3-4 weeks, as far as taxes, because December 31st is a deadline for a lot of different things, but taxes is obviously one of the major components. So what are things that people should be considering or thinking about as they start planning for the end of the year?
Certainly. So we just flipped our calendar to the last month of the year, and you really have about 3 weeks, roughly speaking, because in about 3 weeks we hit Christmas. And
it's game over.
For
No
most people, once you hit Christmas, there's about 1 week to the end of the year, and you're pretty much not going to do anything aside from just kind of recover from sort of the holidays and coast into the new year. So, yeah, as far as a tax perspective go, there's a few things that you want on your radar as you kind of cruise into that Christmas holiday. So, obviously, RMDs, for those who are required to take minimum distributions from your retirement accounts, you should know if you're in this category because you're above age 72. And if you're in that category and you've not yet done that, then you probably will want to check in on that because it's something you really need to do over the next 3 weeks and just coordinate that. It won't take very long, but you should check in on it and make sure that that's happened. If you're a client of ours, we've been reaching out to you and letting you know what that amount is and following up with you and having discussions with you. So, if you're a client of ours and you're age 72 or above, you shouldn't have anything to worry about because we've been proactively working through.
And
that.
we talked about on our last Nest Egg video about qualified charitable distributions that you can utilize with your RMDs. But what's some other things? Yeah,
Roth conversions. So this is a perfect time of year. You've got a lot of your earnings already sort of baked in. So if you're still employed, you kind of have your pay stubs that show really what you've had so far this year. You have a pretty good idea of what your deductions are going to be. Your picture's almost complete from a kind of income tax standpoint for the year. So you can do a pretty good rough calculation on whether or not a Roth conversion makes sense for you. Now, if you're in sort of those initial years of retirement where income is really low, well, you don't have pay stubs. So a lot of that picture is very clear. So if you've not already listened to our Roth conversion, we did a Nest Egg and on-demand video, so forth, be sure to check that out. But now is a good time to sort of in the next week or two really frame up whether or not that's something that you are interested and want to complete. And when we did our Nest Egg topic on that, we actually got quite a few calls and emails and so forth, people interested. So I know a lot of, especially our clients, have looked into that and done those calculations and have actually been putting a lot of that in motion.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think kind of just rounding out the whole tax picture for looking towards the end of the year, you can do charitable giving. You can look at utilizing a donor-advised fund is an area where you can put multiple years or mass contributions in and then distribute out to nonprofits of your choice over coming years. So that's a place that you could consider doing some charitable giving to help the tax picture and then also meet kind of your goals of charitable giving. What else? What am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, the charitable giving one is really big. You'll get hit on all sides by charities that really want you to give during this season. But I think from a tax perspective, looking at your charitable giving and figuring out how to optimize that from a tax perspective, and you mentioned something like a donor-advised fund, or even if you don't utilize that, just grouping your charitable giving into an every other year sort of philosophy could be very helpful in this sort of season of higher standard deductions, especially for folks who may have already paid off their house and now state and local income taxes are capped at $10,000. It can actually be very hard to get above that standard deduction if you don't have home interest deduction and also do significant charitable giving. Add in then that $10,000 local and state tax, and the amount that you have above the standard deduction could actually be relatively low. So if you were to take a strategy where you group your charitable giving, if you're charitably minded, if you group that into sort of an every other year strategy, you can actually significantly benefit from that from a tax standpoint.
Okay, great. All right, well, we hope you're liking these videos, guys. We need your questions to send in. Send those questions into our email, nestegg@jewelfinancial.com. We're taking these questions and we're using them on the show, and we want to answer the ones that are important to you all. But all right, that's good. Everybody have a good rest of your week.